Hey everyone, we are on our final page of this ACT practice test. It's been a long time coming, so it looks like we're on, what part are we on now? Part 8. We're on part 8 of this whole practice test. So, once again, if you're new to this video, I have all the other pages linked on my channel, and this test is linked below in the description. And I circle all the answers so we know we're getting back to the correct answer every time I do the problem. So let's go ahead and get started. And just a reminder, I'm not affiliated with ACT. I'm just doing this for anyone who needs it. All right, so 55. If I is equal to the square root of -1, then what is, and it has this long expression here. So some of you may have learned about imaginary numbers. And typically you memorize what I through I to the 4th power is, but if you don't have those memorized, which most people don't, then let's just write what all their values are to the side, and let's solve this. So it says I is the square root of -1. So then we know that I squared is technically the square root of -1 squared, right? Which is just -1. So I'm going to kind of box these two so I know what my final answer is. So then I to the 3rd power is really square root of -1 times square root of -1 times square root of -1. Okay, which is what? If you multiply these two together, that's -1 times the square root of -1. So it's basically -I. But let's just leave it as negative square root of -1. So then I to the 4th is really just this negative square root of 1 times the square root of -1, because this had 3, so we're just multiplying 1 more. So that's square root of 1 times square root of 1 is negative 1, which is just positive 1. And then the whole cycle repeats itself. So multiply this by 1 more square root of -1. So that's just going to get us square root of -1. So let's plug all these into this equation up here. So I have this I, which I found to be the square root of -1, plus I squared, which we found to be -1, plus I to the cubed, which is negative square root of -1, over I to the 3rd, we said was negative square root of -1, plus I to the 4th, which is positive 1, plus I to the 5th, which is square root of -1. So let's combine like terms. The square root of -1 minus square root of -1, those are gone. Negative square root of -1 plus square root of -1 also cancel out. So we're left with -1 over 1, which is just -1. There was a lot of -1s going on there. So our answer is B. So these imaginary numbers here, you actually typically memorize, I think it's in Algebra 2 possibly, you memorize these first 4 and what they equal out to. And then anything after the 4th, it just repeats itself in the same pattern. So like I to the 6th is just going to be -1. So the whole thing just repeats itself in 4s over and over again. All right, 56. Let me zoom out here a little bit. In one of the following graphs in the standard coordinate plane, the solution set to the system of inequalities below is shown shaded. Which is the correct answer? So let's start with this first one. I'm going to put a little pink polka dot next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this equation for y over here first, because I see that this is a line. So 1x. I'm going to move the x over. I'm going to get it in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to get y alone. So I have 2y is less than or equal to negative 1x, and that's a positive 6. And then get rid of that 2 in front of the y by dividing. So y is less than or equal to negative 1/2 x plus 3. Okay, so let's see which one of these like starts at 3. So pretend this starts at 3 and goes down 1 over 2. Okay, it could possibly be this one. It could not be this one. This one doesn't have a negative slope, so J is out. It could possibly be this one. It could be all these that have a negative slope. So let's look at this sign to see what we're shading. It's less than or equal to, so my line has to be not dotted, it has to be solid. So now G is out. Because see, G has a dotted line. So that one's out. I'm gonna cross these out a little better. So forget those. Now, the less than symbol means we shade everything below the line. So where do we have everything shaded below the line? We still have this one. We still have F. We still have K. And we don't have H. Cool. So now we just have to deal with this second equation. This second equation, I'm going to write it down here. It looks like, well, we know actually it's a circle because they show us circles in all our answers. So let's get into typical standard circle form. That means x and y are on the same side. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to move over that 3y squared. And it looks like we can simplify this whole thing. We can divide everything by 3. I'm just going to take out that GCF of 3. And then whenever you're graphing a circle, standard form is this last number is your radius squared. So this says 4. So what squared is 4? 2. So my radius of this circle is 2. So let's look back at our line. It says my slope intercept, my y-intercept is 3. And my radius here is 2. So do you see it can't be F because it looks like this is correct at 3, but this is not at 2. So it's not that one. So we are left with K as our answer. So see, it has a radius of 2. So this is assuming up 2. And the line has a y-intercept of 3 if we graphed this properly. So down 1 over 2. So there's my pink line. So these are kind of good just to eliminate everything you don't know first. And then if you didn't or know circle equations, you could guess between F and K, and it's a much better chances of getting it correct. All right, 57. Let A, B, C, and D be real numbers. Given that A, C equals 1, so A times C is 1. B plus C over D is undefined. When something's undefined, that typically means you're dividing by 0, so D is probably 0. And it says A times B times C is equal to D. Well, we just said D is 0. So A, B, and C is equal to 0. Okay, so let's see which must be true. Either A equals C 0 or C equals 0. That's not true because if either of these were 0, you would not get 1. You would get 0 when you multiplied them. A is 1 and C is 1. Well, that could be true. These could both be 1 and get you 1, right? But what if A was 1/2 and C was 2? That would also get you 1. So it's not that one. A has to equal negative C. Once again, that's not necessarily true. You could have A as 1 and C as 1. B has to equal 0. That is true because, guys, if A is not 0 and C is not 0, you need something to zero out this entire equation. So B is going to equal 0. So D is our answer. And if you want to keep going, B plus C isn't going to equal 0 because, I mean, you could plug things in for it, but it's not necessarily true. B has to be 0. All right, next one. All right, a cosine graph. Lots of graphing on this last page. A cosine function is shown in the standard coordinate plane below. Which of the following equations represents the function? Okay, well, we know it's a cosine. So standard parent function, like without stretching or anything, is y equals cosine of x. So typically that would look something like, let me see if I can do this properly. Here's pi. And then over here would be like 2 pi. So the standard parent function, this is going to be really not the best looking graph, would look something like this. Okay, so let's take what we know and let's kind of play with this. I see that the amplitude, which is how high it is, just the curve here, is 1, 2, 3. So that means I'm going to have a 3 in front of my cosine. So I can eliminate f and g. Now, x, this x right here, that means that's called the period. So we're trying to figure out from here to here. So from peak to peak. Typically, a period for cosine functions is 2 pi. So typically, this x is 2 pi. However, we're only going to pi. This is 0. This is pi over 2. This is pi. I can't really do like a whole cosine function lesson here so we can get through it. But a typical period is 2 pi, but we're only doing pi. Okay, so that means we need 2 times that. So our answer comes out to be K. Because this is not our period and this is not the correct period. All right, this is kind of a doozy, so buckle in for this one. The figure below shows a flying kite. At a certain moment, the kite string forms an angle of elevation of 75 degrees from point A on the ground. At the same moment, the angle of elevation of the kite at point B, 240 feet from A on level ground, is 45 degrees. What is the length in feet of the string? So get your calculator out for this one. You will definitely need it. So I know I need to find the string, so I'm going to label the string as X. There's really not much I can do here without doing, getting a right triangle. So I'm going to draw a line, a 90-degree angle here, so I have 2 right triangles. I have one here, and I have one here. So now I need to label some sides. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to label this side as Y. So this side is going to be 240 minus Y. Now, this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So that means that this side right here, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit, is 240 minus y. Okay? So let's figure out what y is just looking at this triangle. Okay, I'm given that this side is 75, or this angle. So from this angle, I have the opposite and the adjacent legs. In SOHCAHTOA, opposite and adjacent, you want to use tangent. So the tangent of 75 degrees is equal to the opposite side, which is 240 minus y, over the adjacent side, which is y. So let's solve for y. I'm going to move this y over. So I have y times tan of 75 equals 240 minus y. I'm going to move, I'm trying to get all my y's on the same side. That's what I'm trying to do first. So I'm going to add that y over. And now I'm kind of stuck because I need to get tan to the other side. So I'm going to factor out a y from both of these terms. Plus 1. So see, if I distributed y to that and to that, I'd get back to that original problem. And then this being multiplied, so to undo multiplication, I'm going to use division. 1. And I know all our answers here, most of them have a square root. So I'm just going to put everything into decimals to make life a little easier. So I'm going to go on my calculator here and do 240 divided by tangent 75 plus 1. I get about, so we're approximating here, 50.72. So that's this side right there. So then this right here is 240 minus that 50.72. So this is 189.28. So now when you find our x, we can use the Pythagorean theorem now. So I have my a squared plus b squared equals c squared. My a is my smallest side, which is this 50.72. My b is the 189.28 squared. And my hypotenuse is the string, x squared. So let's do that on our calculator. 50.72 squared plus 189.28 squared. And then take the square root of that. And this is all great calculator stuff here. So x is equal to, I got 195.96. So that's obviously not any of these. So in your calculator, do 80 times the square root of 6. And those are the exact same answer. One's just in decimal form and one is in simplest radical form. There may be an easier way to do that. That's just the way that I would see it based on how well you know trig. Last one. If a publisher charges $15 for the first copy of a book that is ordered and then $12 for each additional copy, which of the following expressions represents the cost of Y books? Okay, so our first book was $15 plus 12 times, okay, Y books. Y is the number minus the first book that we bought because the first book was $15. So I made this expression, so simplify it. 15 plus 12y minus 12. Combine like terms. 15 minus 12 is 3. And I'll stick that 12y in the front. That gets us F. we are finally finished. I hope this helps with the explanation for those problems for this last page of the practice test. Feel free to subscribe for more math videos. Thanks for watching. I've had fun doing this.